wish your computer could, like, connect the dots. And I don't mean in some crazy conspiracy theory way. I mean for real.
Yeah, like it could actually learn and solve problems just by figuring out which parts of the information are important.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, this whole world of pointer networks.
Or PTR nets for short, because who wants
Oh,
to say that whole
that's
thing?
right. So PTR nets, they're all about AI that can work with sequences and, get this, pointers. Sounds kind of technical, but it's actually super cool once you get it.
It really is. See, traditional neural networks, they sometimes struggle when the size of the answer depends on the size of the question.
Like, how is the AI supposed to know how long the answer should be if it doesn't know how much information it's working with?
Exactly. It's like asking what's the best route through this city without knowing if it's a tiny town or a sprawling metropolis.
Makes sense. So how do pointer networks solve this?
They have this clever trick, attention mechanisms. Imagine a spotlight, right? It helps you focus on the most important part of whatever you're looking at.
Okay, yeah, got the spotlight. But how does that work in, like, AI terms?
So instead of just giving a general answer based on the whole input, a PTRNet uses attention to zero in on specific parts of the input, kind of like saying, this right here, this is what matters most.
So it's not just looking at the whole picture, it's understanding which parts of the picture are actually important.
Exactly. It's like giving the AI a way to show its work, which is super useful for problems where the output needs to be a specific sequence, and that sequence can be a bunch of different lengths.
Okay, now my mind is racing with possibilities. Imagine, like, telling an AI to plan a delivery route with a ton of stops, and it doesn't just spit out a list, it actually highlights the best route on a map.
You got it. That's the kind of specific output PTRNets can handle. And to really see what these things can do, the researchers behind this paper, they started by throwing some classic geometry problems at it. First up, convex hulls.
Convex hull. Okay, that's bringing back some vivid memories of high school geometry class. Not all of them good, if I'm being honest.
Well, it's actually pretty simple, visually at least. Imagine you have a bunch of dots scattered randomly on a board, and you take, like, a rubber band and stretch it around all those dots.
Okay, I'm visualizing it. So you're saying the shape that rubber band makes, that's the convex hull.
You got it. No inward curves.
Yeah.
Just a smooth outer boundary connecting those outermost points.
Okay, so it's like finding the outer perimeter of some weird blobby shape. Got it. But why use that as a test for the AI? Seems kind of random.
Not random at all. See, with convex hulls, we already have established algorithms that work really well. So it's the perfect benchmark to compare how the AI stacks up against more traditional methods.
Right, so it's like a standardized test, but for AI geometry skills. Love it. So how did our pointer network student do?
Ace it. And I don't mean just scraping by. We're talking near perfect accuracy finding the convex hull, even in cases specifically designed to trip up the traditional algorithms.
Get out of here. So is it like actually learning or is it just memorizing the answers?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the really exciting part is it seems like it's actually learning the concept of a convex hull, not just memorizing solutions.
How can you tell?
They gave it problems with way more points than it was trained on, like way more, and it still nailed it.
That's incredible. Okay, so they threw convex hulls at it and it aced the test. What other geometric challenges did they cook up?
Next up, they cranked up the difficulty with something called Delaunay triangulation.
Triangulation. I mean, triangles, I get it, but what's so special about this Delaunay business?
Okay, so picture that same set of points scattered around. But this time, instead of just connecting the outer ones, you got to connect all the points with lines to form triangles.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you so far. Sounds like a recipe for a very messy picture.
It would be if there weren't a rule. The rule is, when you draw those lines to make your triangles, you have to make sure that no point in your set ends up inside the circumcircle of any other triangle.
Hold on, you lost me at circumcircle. You're going to have to break that one down for me.
All right, sorry. Back to high school geometry for a sec. Every triangle, you can draw a circle around it that touches all 3 points. Right, that's the circumcircle.
Okay, yeah, I vaguely remember that.
So in Delaunay triangulation, you're basically trying to create a web of triangles where those circumcircles are as empty as possible. No other points from your set should be inside them.
Okay, I'm sort of seeing it's like a jigsaw puzzle, but with triangles and circles. But I still don't get why this particular arrangement is so important.
Well, it turns out this very specific type of triangulation, it actually has a ton of uses, especially in things like computer graphics, 3D modeling, even stuff like analyzing how structures behave under stress. It's all about representing shapes accurately but efficiently.
So this isn't just some abstract math problem, it has real-world implications.
Hmm.
Okay, so how did our pointer network do? Did it rise to the challenge?
It didn't quite knock it out of the park like it did with the convex hull thing, but it still managed to get a lot of the triangles right, which is pretty impressive.
So maybe not a perfect score, but still passing with flying colors.
Exactly. And that's what makes this research so interesting. It's showing us that these pointer networks, they have the potential to be super useful for solving these complex geometry problems. And those problems, they pop up in more places than you might think.
Okay, well now I gotta ask. From triangles to something even more mind-boggling, what about the traveling salesman problem? You know, the classic one where you have to find the shortest route to visit a bunch of cities only once each and end up back where you started.
Ah, yes, the traveling salesman, a classic brain teaser, and not just for students. This problem has been giving mathematicians and computer scientists headaches for decades.
Really? What makes it so tricky? On the surface, it sounds pretty straightforward.
It's all about the explosion of possibilities. See, with every city you add to the route, the number of possible paths you could take doesn't just increase a little, it multiplies.
Wait, really? So like adding one city doesn't just add one extra stop? It's way more complicated than that.
Way more. Think about it. With 3 cities, you've got a few possible routes. But add a 4th city, suddenly you've got a whole bunch of new paths to consider. Because you can add that 4th city in between any of the other 3. 5 cities, even more potential routes. It gets out of hand fast.
So finding the absolute shortest route is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack keeps growing exponentially.
Exactly. It becomes a computational nightmare, even for powerful computers. As you get into even a relatively small number of cities, all the known algorithms, they have to take shortcuts or make approximations. They can't actually look at every single possibility anymore.
So how does a pointer network, with its limited brain power and computational power, even stand a chance against this kind of problem?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Even with those limitations, the PTRNet was able to learn some pretty good solutions for the traveling salesman problem. Surprisingly good, actually. In some cases, it actually did better than the established algorithms that have been around for years.
Hold on, so it's learning from these established algorithms, but then sometimes it's actually outperforming them? That's like the student becoming the master.
Exactly. And it all comes down to the ability of these pointer networks to find patterns and optimize even when the problem seems impossibly complex. They can chew through massive amounts of data, in this case, data about routes, and they start to pick up on the subtle things that make a route more efficient.
Okay, so it's not that the pointer network is magically solving the traveling salesman problem for like hundreds of cities. It's more that it's able to learn from data and come up with really good solutions, even better than the algorithms that were considered the gold standard.
Right, and that in itself is a huge deal. It's opening up new possibilities for how we might be able to tackle these really difficult problems that have been around for ages.
I'm starting to see why this research is such a big deal. Just because a problem is notoriously hard doesn't mean we should just give up and assume AI can't help.
Totally. And this research really highlights that. It's about thinking differently, exploring new approaches, and seeing where these pointer networks might lead us.
So we've seen these pointer networks, these PTRNets, tackling geometry puzzles, going head-to-head with the traveling salesman problem. But I gotta ask, what's the bigger picture here? Where does this all actually matter in the real world?
Honestly, the potential applications are huge anywhere you're dealing with sequences where the order of things is key. We could be talking scheduling tasks, optimizing routes, even making sense of complex data structures.
Okay, so beyond those examples, give me something specific. What's a real-world problem that this could revolutionize?
Okay, how about gene sequencing? Right now, we're using really powerful algorithms to try and piece together those massive sequences of DNA, those genetic blueprints, but it's incredibly complex. PTRNets, they could be a game changer.
You're saying they could make gene sequencing faster, more accurate.
Potentially, yeah. And that means faster diagnoses, more personalized medicine, maybe even unlocking cures for diseases that we're still struggling with today.
Okay, that's huge. But I also sense a but coming.
Of course. Look, it's important to remember the PTRNets, they're not magic. They have their limitations, just like any algorithm.
Right, no easy button for the really, really hard stuff. So what's holding them back? What are the challenges?
One of the biggest hurdles right now is computational power. These algorithms, they can be really demanding, especially as the problems get more complex.
So more data, more variables, that means you need more computing power to handle it.
Exactly. It's like trying to run the latest, most intense video game on a computer that's like 10 years old. It might work, but it's going to be slow, glitchy, not a great experience.
Makes sense. So is it just a matter of waiting for computer hardware to catch up?
It's part of it, for sure, but we also need to keep refining the algorithms themselves, making them smarter, more efficient. It's a two-front battle. Better hardware, smarter software.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into pointer networks, I'm left feeling, well, a little mind blown, to be honest. This research, it's exciting, it's pushing boundaries, but it's clear that we're still in the early stages.
Absolutely. And that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
It's not about having all the answers right now. It's about exploring, experimenting, and seeing where this new path leads.
And for our listeners, if you're as intrigued by pointer networks as we are, we encourage you to check out the research paper yourself. We'll link it in the show notes. You might be surprised at what you discover. Until next time, keep asking those big questions, keep exploring those uncharted territories, and we'll catch you in the next deep dive.